honored to welcome Dean Antonia Villarreal back to Perry Worldhouse. The Dean is the Margaret Bond Simon Dean of Nursing at the University of Pennsylvania School of Nursing and a senior fellow at the Leonard Davis Institute of Health Economics here at Penn. She's a bilingual and bicultural nurse researcher with extensive and practical experience with diverse populations, focusing on health promotion and health disparities. Her innovative research has won many, many awards. And most importantly, she's been a tremendous leader at the University of Pennsylvania and a great partner of Perry Worldhouse, particularly in thinking about issues surrounding nursing and public health as a whole. So thank you for being with us today. And the floor is yours to make some opening remarks and introduce our guests.
So thank you, Mike. And I am so happy to see people and so happy to see people in seats and so happy to see people here at Perry Worldhouse. We were just remarking that this is the last week marks the 5th anniversary of Perry Worldhouse. And we are just so thrilled at Perry Worldhouse for bringing the world to Penn. And again, for all this important dialogue that we're having that's important to us. Part of the initiatives of Perry Worldhouse have been the 5th Global Order Colloquium that is hosted here at Penn. This year promises to once again bring together distinguished leaders, policymakers, and scholars on the biggest problems facing the global order, focusing on how we can better forecast the future of the world, an issue that has become even more pressing and challenging in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic. We are delighted that members of the Penn community have been able to safely join us here in person at Perry Worldhouse, fully masked and vaxxed. And we also are fortunate to have a larger virtual community with us. So welcome all. You know, we are fortunate in this country and on this campus because while we have access to vaccinations and are regularly screened for COVID-19, I was randomly picked, so I have to go for a COVID testing after this, the pandemic continues to ravage the rest of the world. And few have better insights on the pandemic preparedness and response, and indeed in the future of world affairs in general, than our guest today, President Ellen Johnson Sirleaf. Through her leadership of the Republic of Liberia during the Ebola crisis, and through reconciliation and recovery following her nation's decade-long war, and as Africa's first democratically elected female head of state, and Liberia's first female president, President Sirleaf has demonstrated the virtues of public service. I want to share one example of her impactful leadership that I'm familiar with through my colleagues at the University of Michigan School of Nursing, who tell me about her. We witness her strong advocacy and support of midwives and lay midwives to improve birth outcomes for Liberian women through the establishment of maternity waiting homes and by connecting community health workers with nurses and midwives through mobile technologies in remote areas. What you have done to improve maternal mortality in the midst of everything challenging has been a tremendous example for the rest of the nation, and your support of nurses and midwives is something that we all deeply appreciate. Today, as co-chair of the independent panel of Pandemic Preparedness and Response, she is continuing to do good in the world and helping to usher in through the crisis and prepare for the next one. President Sirleaf has been honored with the Mo Abraham Prize, considered the most prestigious award for African leaders. She is a member of the Elders, a distinguished global leader at Perry Worldhouse, and of course, a recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize in 2011. I remarked to President Sirleaf, I asked her if this was her first time in Philadelphia, and she remarked that she had been here before, but the last visit and speech she gave resulted in her being imprisoned. So I hope we give you a better welcome back in Liberia, not here in Philadelphia. But I'm hoping that this has a better outcome for us all. So President Sirleaf will begin with some remarks, and then we'll be in conversation with Deb Amos, a distinguished and award-winning reporter with NPR and a dear friend of Penn and Perry Worldhouse. Many thanks, Deb. And so now please join me in welcoming President Sirleaf and Deb.
Thank you. Let me explain, first of all, greetings to all of you, professors, instructors, students, and say how pleased I am to be here. Let me tell you about the story that she just started to say, just so you know that it wasn't the police that got me in prison, you know. I was here to speak for the Association of Liberians in the United States. And our country was then in military rule. And so I said some rather awful things about the president. So, but it's a great pleasure to be here, because this university influence reaches the distant shores of West Africa, where we reside. Many of those who have come here to obtain their education and their professional skills have gone back and are rendering public and professional service well appreciated in our countries. And so, to the professors here, we urge you to continue to be the open house that you are, to train those coming from different lands, to enable them to go back and serve their countries. Many of you may have heard that on September 25, 2015, the world adopted the Sustainable Development Goals, a 17-point global agenda essentially meant to make our world a better place, to give all the chance for a better life. This year, 2021, we're more than halfway to our target, which is 2030. And the record is clear that we are not on course. We have had some breakthroughs for the reduction in poverty being, reduction of poverty being the #1 goal. But it's clear that too many are being left behind. And our planet needs us to act more responsibly for its preservation. Over the last 6 years, why has the development goals not stayed on course in terms of achievement? That's because over the last 6 years, much has changed in our world to stall the progress. A younger, more educated, more informed population, like you in this audience, the future of today's actions and decisions coming to you, your right to demand participation in national endeavors and considerations in national decision-making, demanding more from us as national leaders, doing what we know has done through the history of mankind. Change has come when young have stood up for change, when they are demanding to be heard. This is what happens in the world today. It's your world, our world, how we treat each other, how we treat our planet. How do we inherit actions? And what do we do about it? our failures and our successes, the things that you have to grapple with. When you leave Penn, you'll face the greatest test. All that you've learned will now be up for application. All that you learned, you'll have to be put to test. And that greater world of opportunity is there, but that world also has the flexibilities and the difficulties that you will endeavor. And so we ask you to take stock of what's happening in your world today. Is the world shifting from global cooperation and coordination? Have you heard the noises about nationalism, protectionism, isolationism, populism? Are we afraid? Some of you, when you're on the street, with whom you will see someone of a different color, and does it make a difference? Are you ready to accept those as being just you? Will their gender make a difference, or the color of their skin, or their choice of worship? Are we paying attention to what's happening to the young people in Myanmar as they put a protest claiming that they too have the right to the freedom of choice? To the young people in Hong Kong or Sudan? Are we all listening to what's happening? Why you must care? What difference does it make with all these things that are happening in the world, this world of turmoil? Because we never know when the unexpected will come. COVID-19, determined by scientists to have begun in Wuhan, China, has today spread to every corner of the world, infecting and killing millions of people. In its deadly sting, COVID reminds us that whatever we do, whoever we are in this world, we are connected. We have an entwined chain of global existence. When COVID hit, I was part of an independent panel I co-chaired, along with Helen Clark, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand. And we were asked to put together, and we had another 9 persons of scientists, professors, executives, come together to see what we could find. And we based our whole work 4 questions. What happened? Why did it happen? What is the effect of it? And what can we do to ensure that it doesn't happen again? We found we knew where Why it happened? Because what was a localized virus in China spread to nations that were unprepared. Even the richest nations were unprepared to stem the pandemic. Unprepared in terms of the national health systems, unprepared in terms of the policies. Sadly, COVID-19, it remains with us today, spreading in variants such as the Delta. It has caused 4.5 million deaths, destroyed millions of livelihoods, and pushed tens of millions of people back into extreme poverty, with women and girls suffering a disproportionate impact. The International Monetary Fund has predicted an impact of $22 trillion on the world economy by 2025, an amount that pales when compared with the 100 billion annually that is required to respond to the pandemic. We now seek to ensure that we prevent it, and there's been silver linings. The researchers and scientists have done their duties. They have now produced vaccines as the cure-all for the pandemic. But now we face vaccine equity. And that's another issue that we all have to confront. We must care that when a disease is as widespread as it is, affecting everybody who have no means to respond, that a solution that does not serve everyone makes us conclude that nobody's safe until everyone is safe. And this is why we need to ensure that vaccines available to the richer countries who have the means to purchase them, to be able to vaccinate a target of 100% of their population, as they rightly should. But that if we don't get them to purchase enough so that surplus vaccines are transferred to the poorer countries, it means that we all remain unsafe because our borders are open and cannot be managed. And so that's why we all speak, but we say there's one other thing we need to address. If we're going to make vaccine the one that solves the COVID-19 pandemic, then it's not enough to have vaccines manufactured in this country or in Russia or in China or in India and have them transported, sometimes with delivery systems that are unreliable. Then we have to tackle something else. We have to tackle intellectual property, because those vaccine was produced by scientists with support from their governments, and they have a right. They have a right to it. It is the intellectual property. And so we can't get them to do what we want them to do, and that is to have technological transfers into the countries of the South where they can produce vaccines, but it's happening. And so today we do have with the African Union, as far as Africa is concerned, from when I come, have been very effective in advocacy, in demand, in mobilizing its own resources based upon our experience of Ebola, the virus of before, to be able to get manufacturing started in our countries as one is starting in South Africa. And we're hoping that others will take place in other places like in Latin America. We hope that our delivery system will be so that the COVAX platform, if you have heard about the COVAX platform, it was a platform to receive all of the materials, the PPE, everything that was needed to be able to address it. But that platform ended in India before it could get to Africa. And when India got a variant that suffered most of their populations, those doors were closed. And so this is why the press to get manufacturing in the South is high. And so whatever you do as you go out, bear in mind, make the case for the development of resilient global health systems. That is the real answer. Vaccine is a cure-all, but vaccine is not the one that provides sustainability in healthcare. It's healthcare systems. Healthcare systems that recognizes the value, the role, and the importance of health workers. And for those of us in countries like our own, community health workers, those that face the people on a daily basis, that know the people, the tradition, the culture, the history, they are the ones that will be able to respond. They are the ones that enable us. And so as we think about global health challenges, let me now call on you to think about another: gender equity. In 1985, the world adopted the Beijing Declaration Platform for Action with a goal of 30% of women in leadership throughout the world. That Beijing Declaration was also taken up by the General Assembly in a political declaration that all women, all countries, had a right, must insist on policy action that places 30% of the population in leadership. Where are we today? +25 years after Beijing. We have 27 women who have served as heads of states and government. Currently, 14 offer that position. In Africa, we have 2 who serve as president, having inherited it. We have 1 who was democratically elected. I was. We have 12 women presidents and 1 chancellor, Angela Merkel of Germany, who relinquished that position 3 days ago through elections. In Africa, we have 7, we have 53 countries. We have only 7 that sit, as mentioned, 2 that serve at the presidential level, 7 as vice president. In terms of Congress, I don't know the record for Congress in your country, but the average, the global average is about 27% of women, what we call parliament. The Africa average is about the same. We have one country, Rwanda. I think there's a student from Rwanda somewhere here. I saw that they have been able to get 61% plus globally, not just in Africa, well, 61% globally. So we've applauded them. In high positions, international institutions, we have 3 women that hold top positions in financial institutions. 14 of 173 central banks worldwide are led by women. You know, I'm throwing some of these statistics around and I can't tell you they're fully reliable because the sources that we're gathering from different places have just recently talked about a disaggregation of data to be able to see where the places where women are. And I hope that those are the things in the universities like your own, like Penn, will be able to dig into that. We're trying to get it from different sources in different countries. So we really can't tell a story about gender equity. We can't say with reliability how women have progressed over time and be able to judge the measures, what are the constitutional measures or political or policy measures. You see, I have a center that I have dedicated to trying to do this work, and I'm drawing this from different information that we're trying to gather to see. When it comes to gender equity, let me close with just a short story. The life story of my own. I've had a long, difficult journey, an early marriage, young motherhood, being a housewife for years. But I was determined to be educated, and that determination enabled me to seek higher education. Through Madison Business College, trying to gather some information, University of Wisconsin. Returned home and started active service, made some comments and ended up again in some problem with the government. She mentioned in the introduction about the one in Philadelphia. Led to imprisonment, exiles from home several times, being an activist. But also, difficulties have opportunities too. And so the opportunities of being able to, again, do more, to work. So I've worked in several institutions, including the World Bank, Citibank, United Nations, at different times in my life. In 2005, after tumultuous joining of exiles, imprisonment, good, public service, I was elected in 2005 as the first African woman president. And I served 2 constitutional terms of office as required by the Constitution. And I led the democratic transition of power from me to the football icon that everybody knows, George Weah. After two long fights, which I won, I finally vacated the seat and he took it. But over the years, we have known lots of strong women, and I just want to mention some of them because they're so historical. Rosa Parks Eleanor Roosevelt of the United States. Eleanor Roosevelt spent a lot of time advocating for rights, not just women's rights, but human rights. Margaret Thatcher of the United States, she believed in the economics of power, the transformation effect of capitalism. Indira Gandhi of India. And of course, my own hero, Angela Merkel of Germany. I've mentioned her before. The one woman who really, really ruled the world. You got to give it to her. Because while the great powers of the world lost their pilot and was scrambling, going back to geopolitics with everyone claiming the interests of their own countries, threatening multilateralism upon which world cooperation and coordination had rested. There's only one that stood up and was able. And to see the power of women, because not only do they have power, but they demonstrate empathy. Just think when migrants were leaving the shores, something, and all were being rejected, there's one woman who stood up and said, we'll take 1 million of them. And she was able to accommodate 1 million there at great expense to her popularity. She never could get rid of the fact that because it didn't go the nice ways that everyone expects when you offer freedom to people, that they're going to be disciplined and legal in their actions, and it doesn't happen. We also have Winnie Mandela of South Africa, who led the charge when Nelson remained in jail for all those many years. Angie Brooks Randolph, Liberia, the second woman to be president of the General Assembly that led the thing for the liberation of Namibia. Today, we look for our new heroes, and we have some of them. I'm sure if you're looking at your social media and you're looking at all of us who got these, what do you call it, Twitter? I have a Twitter too, but I don't do Facebook. So if you look at your Twitter, you'll see that Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala of Nigeria, after a long fight by all the women of the world, is now the first woman to head the World Trade Organization. And she's leading the charge. She was also the chair of Gavi, the global institution that handles vaccines production, but she's heading the World Trade Organization. So she now has to deal with intellectual property and technological transfer. We also have Christina Georgieva of the International Monetary Fund. She was heading the World Bank. She transferred to the International Monetary Fund. And Christine Lagarde, who was in the International Fund, is now the European Central Bank. Amina Mohammed, a Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. She's one of our big stars. And I also mentioned Mary Robinson of the Elders, someone who held so many positions. So, women equality, women equity is still a long way off. But what we aim to do is to see that we bring them the justice and the equity. Because all of the leaders I've talked about, not only have they led with integrity, with commitment, with courage, but they also had a common sense of duty to care, empathy to reach out to others. You are the next generation. All that we talk about will be your responsibility. You will guide the destiny of the world. What you learn in these halls will help, but that will not be all. It's after you get there, how you use the talent that you got here, how you position yourself toward a goal that you would set, but a goal that is big enough to accommodate others in their journey toward the achievement of their goals. In a month, I will celebrate my 83rd birthday. A journey of almost 50 years. Wow. But it's been the same for all the other women who carry the torch. We will now pass the torch to you, to all of you, young men and women, and leave it in your care. Your world will be run by you. We hope that you bring to it all that is just, that you demand as you must, that you have courage unwavering as you should. And in the end, make it a better place. The equity for the misfortune, the equity for women, the equity for those who are physically challenged will be what you will confront. And may God guide you in your decision to make our world a better place. Thank you.
I'd like to be the last person on this panel to say how exciting it is to be here, to actually see you in person, and to be in a hybrid event. A couple of things. One, you've won a Nobel Prize, you've been the president of your country, and you didn't meet a Merkel, but you met a Markle last week, Harry and Meghan, who are in your vein. I'm curious about your 4 questions, and here's where I want to start. You said we need to ask about the effect. And I'm thinking that in Africa, when they watched the First World, throwing away vaccines, you have made the case, there's been plenty who have made the case, but still it's not happening yet. In people's heads, how do they see the West at this moment? As a selfish place? Are they changing their mind about who we are and how we deal with the world? Is this a moment of some breaking of relations between us and you?
I don't think it's so much of a divide between the West and the rest of us. It is a battle that is both domestic and global. It's the rich and the poor. Internally in our countries, we face that same battle. We've got a rich class and a poor class. And so if vaccines reach our country, most likely those in power will probably use the vaccine first before it gets to the rural areas where it's needed most.
Happened here too.
Happens here too. So no. Do we think less of the world? Does this undermine the long years of partnership, support? I don't think so. This is a temporary reaction to grave inequities and injustice. And the demand is fix it. And I think, I think this is going to be something that will be fixed. Unfortunately, many people are dying. Many more people will die until equity prevails. But relationships, I think, will remain. I think we are more concerned about the effect of what's happening in this country on long years of progress in our country. Am I making sense?
Yes. But let me ask you this, and let me tell the audience that we are going to have Q&As from the audience at about top of the hour. So be thinking about your questions, and also you in hybrid land, I will be able to see what you're writing on my computer. Let me ask you this. In the early days of the pandemic, I'm on a call at National Public Radio with our correspondents, and the Africa people kept saying, it's not hitting here yet. And there'd be ideas about why that might be, that it's a younger population, and that was why the COVID numbers remained low. Can you just give some descriptions? We are drowning in descriptions of hospitals in the South where healthcare is rationed and we're all mad at the unvaxxed, and it's a crisis. But I really don't have a good and clear picture. Are there some countries in Africa that still are in pretty good shape and others that are struggling? Can you give us a good picture?
Africa has fared a little bit better with COVID-19, perhaps because of the experience of Ebola. And Ebola brought collective action in the continent. It was isolated with 3 countries in the West, but it brought action from many of the countries. And so the emphasis that was made on giving community health workers the major role, the major responsibility worked. And so when COVID hit, it was just a question of reactivating, reuniting those who had worked as community workers and getting them to work. And that thing about community workers today is a major program by the African Union to train, I think the target is 2 million health workers. They train 2 million health workers to be able to make sure we prepare for the next pandemic. So it hasn't, but people died too. Because initially the same hesitancy that exists here, it's the same hesitancy that existed, particularly among those who knew better. The educated and the rich who felt it would not happen to them. They are the ones. And when they started to die in large numbers, then they quickly got to work to take the vaccine. Now the vaccines are not enough. We had only the AstraZeneca was the main one available to Africa coming through India. And then some took the first shot, and then the supply ran out. Earlier supplies had to be thrown away because people were resisting. But today, I think it's a question now of how quickly can the vaccine be manufactured? How convincing can we be to everybody that by taking the vaccine, they're not only saving their lives, but they're saving the lives of others? How do we get that message across to your people in Nevada? Or
I was going to say, if you figured that out, let us know, please. Um, You know, President Biden's talking about 2 billion doses and then another 2 billion. But my question is about local production. You know, if you can convince the drug companies, and certainly the Chinese have allowed this to happen. The Chinese brought their vaccines to the UAE, which discovered that they weren't very good, as I remember, that you now are going to need a third dose of Sinovac after the UAE did their tests. But anyway, my question is a bigger one in Africa, and that is, do you get a indigenous production sector for a disease that everybody tells us is going to be endemic? We are going to be living with COVID until you and I pass the scene. Do you get something even better for Africa if you can convince the West to allow you to work on the patents?
well, let me first say that we like China for roads and presidential houses and football stadiums.
And belts.
We don't like their vaccine.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Or Russia vaccines.
That one works at least.
It does?
Yeah, it does.
Have you seen someone who tried it?
Got me. Got me on that one.
Anyway, so everyone looking for the vaccines from companies, from manufacturing companies whose name they know. That's the brand issue. You've heard of J&J, you've heard of Merck, you've heard, and so you look to those because that's what you're accustomed to. And so what we want now is to handle the intellectual property issue, and that's being handled. And the licenses issue, voluntary license, technological transfer to have manufacturing produce. And we have, right now, I'm glad that as a result of the Ebola experience, we now have an African Center for Disease Control. Well, headed by a scientist who's really top rate, Dr. John Dangasson. And he has been able to achieve the credibility with the West. And he is guiding the whole program, and he's in charge of ensuring that the idea of vaccine supply, mobilizing our own resources, as we must take prime responsibility too, mobilizing our resources for purchase, but at the same time arguing that our resources will not enable us to be able to do it for our population. Therefore, we need this surplus one. That's why President Biden has now, in the summit the other day, he has talked about allocating so much of the surplus vaccine bought by the United States to be able to give not only to Africa, but to the 79 lower and middle income countries that are the targets for support. 79 of them, countries.
Wow. Let me ask you about vaccine.
Is it 179?
79. Let me
Never
ask you
mind.
about vaccine hesitation is always a strange thing in my view. And outside the country, it gets even stranger because you can't predict who it's going to be. In Berlin, it's the far left who doesn't like vaccines. In Israel, it's the ultra-Orthodox that don't like vaccines. In Africa, who is it? Who is against vaccines and why?
The one who is died from COVID-19. No, that's true. The president of Tanzania. She's not, that's a new president. The vice president has assumed the presidency of Tanzania. But the president who unfortunately passed was totally against, he didn't believe in COVID-19 or the virus or anything. And he had a movement to not allow people to do it. Unfortunately, he got affected.
And he died.
He did die. No, seriously.
And did that change anybody's mind?
Oh, absolutely. The vice president, who's now assumed the presidency, has changed the policy.
So there's no rhyme or reason, there's no political way of thinking that will predict who in Africa is anti-vax.
I think it's an individual decision. In this particular case, it just happened to be a president.
Mhm.
And a president has the power to, of being able to convey his views and to be influenced because of his power or her power. But in terms of who doesn't want it, it's almost a personal issue. It's difficult, and this is why you have to have a program of convincing the population, telling them the effects of what there is, telling them the results of inaction on their part. It's a whole thing about information,
Mhm.
credible information to the public to convince them why it is. Because the normal thing is to think it would not happen to you, that you can be safe, that you don't need it. And people fear, particularly some places, they fear for those who distrust their own government. For those who distrust their own government, they may think that this is something to harm them. So it's difficult.
So I'm going to ask the audience here, if you have a question, to please line up at the microphone. And I've got one more from online as you all are lining up. And here is the question from online. I don't have a name for this, but here's the question. Your autobiography, This Child Will Be Great, was a poignant account of your journey and career in development and politics. In your times of trial, of imprisonment, of challenge, what kept you going?
My belief that my country could be better, that we could do more. We did not have to be continuously left behind. And so every time we faced a situation where the environment, the political environment was negative and destructive, I, along with others, jumped in and said, we just cannot let this, we have to keep fighting, we have to make it better. And we're still doing that.
Okay, I'm going to turn to the audience, and will you please say your name and make sure your question is a question? Yes, because of these, you can even pull your mask down a bit as you're asking your question.
Okay. Hi, thank you very much. My name's Isaac. It's a pleasure to listen to you, President Sirleaf. Thank you very much. So you mentioned a bit about the historical importance of youth movements in the history and sort of making real change. And you talked a lot about sort of the difficulty in persuading people to even, appreciate COVID as a real risk, right? And so sort of moving on to sort of maybe something which has been in people's minds a lot, climate change, and something which the youth are really very much engaging with. What sort of techniques have you noticed in this pandemic which have been helpful in trying to get the general public to sort of listen to things about COVID, which maybe we should consider for climate change?
Leading by example. I think wherever in countries a president or the prime minister, somebody, have gone in public and taken the vaccine openly for everybody to see, has convinced a lot of people that it's safe to take it. That did not happen here.
It was taken in secret.
Hmm?
It was taken here in secret.
Well. So, but I think that has been And if you take that one step further, wherever those who set themselves as leaders provided the example and sent the word that this is the right thing to do, you find that that had an effect in convincing other people that it was the right thing to do.
Thank you very much.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't even see them up that way. Sorry. Yes, please.
Thank you so much, President Sirleaf, for being a light in the world for so many people, especially girls. My name is Dixon, and I'm from Uganda. I have two short questions for you. But first, let me say that that story about Tanzania, the president dying of COVID, is true. He opposed the COVID, and he died of COVID. His name is John Pombe Magufuli. The president now, who was his vice president, is a female leader and has changed the policies of the country. So my question, you have been reported by the British Broadcasting Service that you are not a feminist, even as you have been at the forefront of fighting for women and the girl child, the rights of them throughout your career. If that is true, what is it that you see that so many other feminists may not be seeing? The second question is Africa prepared to start preparing for the next pandemic, considering how we are dealing with this one? My own country of Uganda, there are reports that people have been vaccinated with water, just to give them hope. There are reports that in Liberia, which is your country, they have only vaccinated 1% of the population. Are we really prepared to start thinking about the next pandemic in a light of how we are doing now?
The first question, who can define feminism? Who's willing to define it for me? Because I'm trying to learn what, yeah. Okay.
That would be you, right?
Yeah.
I thought so.
Do I have to say I'm a feminist? I prove it by what I do, by what I say. Do I have to stand up to the microphone and tell everybody, just look, I'm a feminist? So I guess somebody asked a question. Maybe it was one of those days when somebody was asking, I said, look, it depends on how you define feminism. I'm not gonna get up one of those that says that, I do it all my bras and I'll do it this. I'm a technocrat also. So I'm both feminist, technocrat, leader, servant, whatever. Yes. What was your other question? He had another question about,
It was, are you ready?
no, Liberia has only 1%. That may be true because most of our population reside in rural areas. And we have serious infrastructure constraints, being able to get the vaccine to them there. Don't forget, in the entire Africa, there's just 4% that's been something. So you can easily be that Liberia may have only 1. So our job is big. Unfortunately, in the rural areas, it's not affecting them that much because they're not mixing with crowds. They go about their farms and their markets and their homes. They don't get involved in too much social activity.
Yep.
Hello. Hi, Madam President. Thank you so much. My name is Catherine Jones. I am particularly interested in the intersection of and relationship between gender equity and technology. I'm wondering if you spoke at length about gender issues very eloquently. I'm wondering if you could talk a bit about connectivity in Liberia, if you're noticing the digital divide closing, or what your opinion is about access to the internet on the African continent in 2021.
Today, our country and most countries live by the internet. I know that it's important that knowledge is conveyed to many, and this is what an internet provides, you know, the means for doing so. But it's got to the place where, and I ask you to answer that question. When we have to rely on Google for everything, is their information based on proper research and evidence? Are they taking away from the knowledge-based initiative of digging in that takes place in universities? If Google's going to solve all our problem? Is that, so, but it's there, it's an information that we use, but it also has its negative effects. The demonstration effect of protests, of riots, of drugs, that because of the freedom, the right to knowledge, the right to information is inherent in everyone's desire. But we've reached a place where you're hearing now, should we have some controls? Should we have some regulations? This is why Facebook has been denying certain people to put put information on the Facebook. So does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Let's come to this side, and we're going to go fast now because we have dwindling time. So one question, please.
Okay. Thank you so much for gracing us with your presence today. My name is Habib. I'm from Kenya, and my question is, I believe that we have a lot of talent on the African continent, specifically in STEM, but we've been slow to see innovation coming from the continent to deal with coronavirus. So what do you think are some of the factors that hinder innovation in STEM on the African continent?
Our innovators are here. They're not there. They come here, like they learn here, and they stay here. So we lose them. We have over 100-something doctors, medical doctors for Liberia. They are here. They're not in Liberia.
How do you get them to stay?
That's the $24,000 question. Because sometimes the arguments are legitimate. We need better education system for our children. We need better health service for our children. Those are legitimate. But on the other hand, we can't get those better health systems and education systems unless the educators and the doctors and come home and build it. It's a dilemma as to what we do. We have repatriation programs that bring some of them home, and some have been successful. Ghana has now done a lot because I think that people have always had this great something about being home. And they have built that culture of home. I think Rwanda is the same way. So where that culture is there and people have promoted that culture of coming home and being a part of service to your country and building your thing, it has worked. Today, I think most Ghanaians can hardly finish their schooling before they run back home because now it has a viable private sector, you know, where the jobs are created and where the real sustainability in growth takes place is when the private sector is an engine of that growth and not just reliant on public service through the government.
I'm very sad to say that this is our last question.
Hello, my name is Jingjing Periyalutsak. I was wondering how in countries that may not have had a history of having a lot of women in power, we can overcome or reconcile with cultural barriers that may prevent women from being in positions of decision-making.
We have to continue to challenge the stereotyping. The thing that says women rightful place is taking care of children. As much as we know that that's our role and we carry out very well, or taking care of the home, we need to look at the Scandinavian countries and what they have done. They've done quotas. And those who argue that we don't want to see a quota system for women empowerment because it would take away from competition, they are dead wrong. We're not talking about a giveaway. We're talking about the right to compete. You know, and so, but we have to keep advocating. Some have seen constitutional change. Some have done with policy changes and lawful changes to be able to do it by giving quotas, by carrying out programs, and it's working. But the pace is too slow. It will take another, what, 100 years to see full gender equity at the current pace. We all wish the United States had. We still hope the United States will have a woman president. Can you imagine the #1 power country of the world, the #1 democracy of the world, has not been able to elect a woman president? That tells you how hard the battle is.
Madam President, you have done a marvelous, marvelous job. I thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madam President, and thank you, Deb, for your expert moderation, as always. And thanks to you, the audience, for joining us for the second public event of our 2021 Global Order Colloquium. We hope that you'll join us online at 3 p.m. for After the Fall, the Future of America's Role in the World, with Ben Rhodes, former Deputy National Security Advisor from the Obama administration. As always, you can access a recording of this on our YouTube channel, you know, like within a day or so. And please follow us on social media at Perry World House on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, not TikTok. Thanks again to President Sirleaf and to Deb Amos, and we hope you all have a great day.